So, hi everybody. I'm Marshall Yount, and this talk is about how to navigate the career ladder, how to think about your own career development, and become successful in any organization. And so, this talk has been designed with kind of like an engineer's mindset, but a lot of the concepts are very general for any kind of technology organization. I had a question earlier from a product manager, and we went through the slides, and I think there's like maybe 20% of them are very engineering specific, but a lot of it's pretty general purpose. So, a little bit about me. I'm a distinguished engineer here at Foursquare. I live in Berlin, Germany, and in my spare time, I like to blow things up. And I've learned since I got to Serbia that that's also a common pastime here, so I'm pretty excited about visiting again in the future. So I've had a lot of different roles at a lot of different companies. Most of it has been in engineering, but I've dabbled in some of the other disciplines. I've also worked in companies of a lot of different sizes, a lot of startups, but growing companies and some really big ones. And this is just sort of like a sampling of things that I've worked on. The point of this is not those items, just that I've got a lot of gray hair in my beard. I've worked at a lot of different companies, and I've seen some patterns. So for an overview, we're starting out with an introduction. That's this part. Then we're going to introduce a framework or a mental model that you can use to think about all of this stuff. I have some tips, some specific actionable things that you can do, and then we'll have some time for a Q&A at the end. Cool. So why should we care about this? This is probably obvious, but I think we all want to grow, we all want to learn, and we all want to get rewarded for that. This is the framework we're going to use during the talk. First part's about process, the second part is about standards, and the third part is about stakeholders. And before we get into the framework, I want to take a little diversion and talk about games. So, who here plays games? Raise your hand if you play games. Raise your hand if you play chess or have played chess. How about Go? Yeah, a lot fewer of us know how to play Go. It's been years since I've played, and the reason that I bring up these two games is because I really struggle when I play Go, because I kind of think about it from a chess perspective, and it's a totally different game. And the point here is that navigating a career ladder is kind of like a game, and if you're playing the right game, you can win, and if you're trying to play the wrong game, you won't get anywhere. So, just like the game analogy, we have rules, a board, and players in a game. The rules kind of map to the process part of our framework. The board maps to the standards, and the players map to the stakeholders. This metaphor is not perfect, but we're just going to roll with it. And before we really get into the talk, I want to talk a little bit about geography. So I've spent most of my career working in this little corner right here, or for companies that are in that kind of mindset. That's about half of my career there. The other half of my career has been working for other companies that are inside of North America. And I recognize that we are here right now in Europe, and things are different. So I've tried to talk to people and make this talk a little bit more generic and flexible. But I really want to hear the feedback from you at the end during the Q&A period about things that either map or don't map to your life here. Cool. So shall we dive into process? So yeah, first we're going to talk about the rules of the game. And if you put on your engineer's mindset, these form like the boundary conditions of the problem that you're trying to solve. And so I don't know what the specific rules will be at the company that you work for. You'll have to ask your manager about them or your HR person. But I can tell you some general things that I've seen along the way in all the different companies that I've worked for. So a lot of this is about career progression. And so very briefly, I want to introduce a concept called the Dreyfus model of skill acquisition. The Dreyfus model is from the field of pedagogy. That is a very fancy word that means the academic study of teaching and learning. And so the Dreyfus model is a way of thinking about how you can grow from novice to competent, proficient, expert, or master. And when we take this and we map it back towards software development, that would be expressed in the concept of the engineering ladder, where you have roles that proceed from engineer to senior engineer, staff, senior staff, principal, distinguished, whatever. These are the words that we use here at Foursquare. Pretty much every company that I've worked has used slightly different words, so these are probably not the same words at the company that you work at, but there's probably a similar progression. And as we move along this path, we sort of naturally unlock better pay, better prestige, more autonomy, more authority, and better career opportunities. But sitting as an engineer and talking to other engineers, people often find this path to be confusing. So the first part about process that I want to talk about is timing. And every company has a different cadence for reviewing and promoting people. The most common thing that I've seen is probably annual at the end of the year in December, but lots of companies do things differently. I've also seen companies that have no review process, and that is obviously bad. I've also seen companies that will do it twice a year, which is awesome for employees, but really painful for managers because they have twice as much of this kind of work to do. And then I've also seen some other companies that do things in a more ad hoc or chaotic manner, and I find that really frustrating. So in terms of sequence, there's a pattern to how these often shake out. The first thing is usually like your manager writes out their review. This is kind of like a minimalistic view. Then the org will decide on promotions and merit increases. The manager will deliver the review, and then, yay, we receive rewards. But like I said, this is a stripped-down minimal process. There are a few steps that I also like to see in other companies, and some of them we do here at Foursquare. The first thing that we do here at Foursquare that I really like is a self-assessment. And so this is an opportunity in November. You sit down and write maybe a page out about what you've accomplished during the last year. And then this helps your manager write out the review. Managers are people. Managers are fallible. Managers have bad memories. And so this is a good opportunity for you to remind them of all the awesome stuff that you did. One thing that I've done in the past, but we don't do here at Foursquare, is official peer feedback system where like a company like Google will have a 360 review system where they solicit feedback from all kinds of people that work with you they're added to your self-assessment and what you get from your manager. This third step is manager writes review. That's a repeat from the minimalistic process before. The other new step that I wanted to expose here is often called calibration. And so the idea here is like all the managers at the company will get together and talk about all the engineers at the same rank at the same time to make sure that it's fair. And so you might have one manager that's like a really hard grader or another one that is a little bit easier, and the calibration process helps to even that out. And then the last three steps stay the same. But you often see like the self-assessment happens in May, losing my months. The self-assessment happens in November, and then a lot of this stuff happens in December, January, and there's just so many things going on that the reviews don't come out until springtime with the rewards. So it's fairly common to see a long stretch there. So that concludes our process section of the talk, and now I want to talk about standards. I'm not sure how well this translates locally, but this is a sign from an amusement park that says to get on the ride, you have to be this tall. And so we want to talk about standards. And so what are some reasons that we see people get promoted at different companies? We have some bad criteria, some weak criteria, and some good ones. So bad criteria, sometimes you see people get promoted because they're popular or because they're likable. Nobody will actually say this, but sometimes it happens that way. In terms of weaker criteria, sometimes you see people get promoted just because they've been at the company for a long time or because they're really an awesome programmer. But I think the best criteria is to promote people and give them good reviews because they have a lot of impact. They have a lot of impact on the business. So why is impact important? So when we measure people based on impact, that leads to better actions. And so I really like this quote from Charlie Munger. Charlie Munger was Warren Buffett's business partner, and he was really, really into incentives. And he said, show me the incentive and I'll show you the outcome. And basically what that means is, people will respond to the way that you reward them, and you'll get exactly the behavior that you incent. So if we go back to the previous examples on the other slide, if you reward people and promote them for tenure, for being around for a long time, what will you get? You'll get people that sit and roll for a long time, whether that's actually good for them or good for the company. Or if you promote people because they're a badass programmer, then what you'll get is people that really want to focus on developing those skills, whether or not they're actually servicing the business. And when we promote based on and give rewards based on impact, that sort of like directly incentivizes people to go do awesome things for the business. So more specifically, many companies will implement a career ladder or career matrix. The very fuzzy screenshot that you see right here is a document that we have here at Foursquare. And going across the top, you have the levels. And going down the side, you have all the different criteria. And so these help people think about where they are. It helps their managers evaluate them. Some pretty common categories would be technical skill. It is part of the evaluation criteria, and we might consider some things like are on this list. We also evaluate people based on productivity and impact. There's my favorite right there. And we'll dig into these attributes in a little bit, and then also leadership and communications. So don't worry too much about this slide. I wanted to show how these things progress because there's like a natural, as you go up the career ladder, there's also a natural increase in what's expected from you. And this is the example that I always start off with, but as you saw on the career matrix slide, there's a lot on here. So just the first one would be, sorry about this. The first one would be, if you are a brand new engineer, I would expect to hand you a fully written bug report and expect you to be able to go fix that. At the next level, I expect to be able to give you a feature and you be able to own that from start to finish. And then as we move up the ladder, we expect people to be able to own services or components, systems or products, or multiple systems. And then this next progression is about influence. And the influence basically goes from yourself to many other people. And the higher you go, you eventually start to need to be able to influence an entire organization. So in terms of output, that also changes as you grow. So at a very early stage, it's all about the code that you're writing. But as people get promoted higher and higher and higher, we expect them to take leadership and start organizing the efforts of other people. And so this slide is my attempt to communicate how, as you get promoted, you write less and less code, and you might be spending more time in Jira or more time in Google Docs or Confluence. This is probably my least favorite part of the career progression because I love writing code. And this is a big struggle for a lot of people as they go up the ladder. But it's just like it's part of having a bigger impact is doing things that are more scalable, and writing code only scales linearly. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about for these progressions is time horizon, where early on in your career, you should be able to plan out a day. But much later on in your career, we're talking about initiatives that might last for multiple quarters for entire teams. And there's just these criteria that are at the bottom are not directly what's in the Foursquare career ladder. I'm just using these as examples to kind of show trends, if that makes sense. So one thing that happened a lot when I was a younger engineer was we had a system where you could get promoted a couple of times, and then you were stuck. You could go into management, or you could basically find a different kind of job. And so what happened here, we would lose a lot of really great senior engineers to go become managers, and we'd lose our best engineers, and we sometimes wind up with crappy managers. And that's not good for anyone. That's not good for the company either. And so one of the things that I really like about this kind of Silicon Valley career mindset is they put together some levels that go up past this, so that people like me who've tried management and are not that great at it still have good opportunities to advance. And so sometimes with these higher levels, we talk about like a manager equivalence, where as you move up the career ladder, you will get similar authority, similar pay, and most importantly, need to have similar impact to these higher level managers. So as you can see, if somebody is a principal engineer, they need to have the same impact as a senior director. And I want everybody to sit and think about that for a minute, because we're talking about one person who has no direct reports needs to have the same impact as somebody that's got like 40 people working for them. That's fucking hard. And it's really intimidating. So how do we actually pull that off? These are some kind of basic activities, mentoring other engineers and helping them grow. Like a big part of my job is making sure that that our senior engineers are growing fast enough to fill in the rest of the ladder. Oftentimes at these higher levels, an engineer will be given a high-level annual company goal. Like if your company does OKRs or other goals like that, a principal or a distinguished engineer might get attached to one of them and be responsible for it. We're also responsible for recognizing and fixing systemic problems. And a lot of what I do is helping to design and implement standards, policies, and procedures. So this is a really good way to get scale out of my work, is to see a problem and fix it for the whole company. And do that by helping other people understand how to do their work better. So the last part of the framework is about stakeholders. And the notes that I have here on my slide just say, who is the decider? Because you will have a lot of people contributing information or contributing to the decision about how people get reviewed and how people get promoted. I like to think of it as these kind of concentric circles, where if you're early in your career, the most important person to give feedback on your performance is going to be your manager. Your manager knows it best, and often your manager has a lot of authority about whether or not you get a good review or whether you get promoted. But if you think back to those impact slides, if somebody is supposed to have an impact that's outside of their team, that means people that are outside of their team need to have input into their review process and have opinions about whether or not they're doing well. And so this is sort of like a chain that goes up from your manager to the head of engineering or even the head of the company. Also, as you go higher up on the ladder, people that are even outside of your department might have input. So I worked at a company once that had a centralized group of architects, and every engineer that was being promoted to level 5 or above, that group of architects had to give at least one thumbs up and no thumbs down. So As you think about navigating this, you want to be thinking about who are the other players on the board, and who do I have to understand how they perceive me. And then we have some other context of things that you can't control that might affect your reviews or your promotions. This doesn't have anything to do with you, but it still has an effect. So things like what's going on with your peers, how the company is performing financially, what's going on in the wider economy. This fourth one, the org chart, is one that bugs me a lot. I worked at one company where there was sort of a limited number of level 5 engineers because every team had one and only one level 5 engineer. We had some great people that were there, but we couldn't promote some of them into level 5 because there were no slots available in the basic organizational structure. And we lost some people, and that sucked. And then sometimes you'll have a situation where somebody might be like an amazing database architect, and the company just doesn't have a need for that. So these are factors that might constrain where you can go. So that section was the framework. We talked about processes, standards, and stakeholders. The next part is about tips. So this is kind of the playbook. The first one is read the fucking manual. And so what this means that if your company has strategy documents, if it has goals for the year that are written down, you need to fucking read them. Think about how your work fits into those goals and that strategy, and then ask great questions. This might be uncomfortable, it might be a stretch, but this is really the path to success. And I tell you, this will put you ahead of 90% of your peers, because most people don't read. If your company has a career ladder, also fucking read that. The next thing, when an engineer comes to me and says they want some help with their career development, I'll have them perform a self-assessment, which basically means get out the career ladder, take the level below you, the level you're at, and the level above you, and walk down that list and check off the one that you think, the level that you think you're performing at here. This is a great place to start, because then I'll sit down and talk to the person and tell them how they perceive their results versus how I do. And oftentimes there are differences. Some information that's useful to supply here, I think different companies will handle this differently, but it's very common and a little bit annoying sometimes, but it's very common for you to get, if you want to get promoted, you'll need to be operating at the level that you want to get promoted to. So, as an engineer, this often does not seem fair, because I'm not getting paid for that. Why am I doing that work? But I want you to think about it from a different perspective. And that perspective is, if I have higher expectations at the next level, if I get promoted into that next level, and I don't immediately change my behavior, I might go from getting really high marks, really great reviews, to getting a really shitty review next time. And that's not fun for anyone. And I have seen situations, and these are terrible, but I've seen situations where people got promoted too early and then got into a performance problem and didn't stay at the company. And that's very sad, and I think nobody wants that. So I think a better way to do this is expect people to be operating at maybe 80% of the next role, and to be able to continue that performance for a couple of quarters. So do you have to get 100 all the way down? No. But you shouldn't have too many areas of deficiency, and if there's a couple of areas of underperformance, you need a plan. Your manager needs to have a plan for how to get you up to where you need to be. And then also there should be some overperformance to balance that out. And so if I'm weak on criteria A, I need to be really awesome on criteria B, and maybe even B and C to really balance that out. Because it's not simple arithmetic, it's kind of a vibe thing. So, after the engineer has written their self-assessment, they should go take it and review it with their manager. Like I alluded to earlier, it's very common for the engineer to disagree with their manager on a few points. We often think we're doing a little bit better than we're doing. And you might not like what your manager has to say. But I want you to also remember that your manager is your best ally in this process. And even if you don't agree with them, you can put together a development plan to address those issues. I think I skipped ahead to the next slide. For making a plan. But yeah, put together a plan to address the deficiencies that your manager says that need to be addressed. And if you're at those higher levels, you need to also solicit feedback from other people about your self-assessment. An important tool here is to create awareness for yourself about how you're doing. And I like to keep a work journal. And the format for this is very lightweight. When I accomplish something, when I ship something, I'll just put a date, write a sentence about it, and then I'm done. So it isn't like writing a page about what happened every day. This journal is really important for you to notice patterns in your own work. And then also, when you get to the end of the year and it's time for your review, you have a lot of written documentation about how things have gone. I don't know about you, but when it gets to December, I've forgotten a lot about what happened the previous year. So this has been really helpful to me. The next part of this process is to just really focus. And when I say focus here, I mean make the organization's priorities your priorities. And so this does not mean to ignore what your manager says. If your manager has given you an assignment that you don't feel like really aligns with your work's priorities, these happen, they're important. Our work is very complicated and there's a lot to do that is not strictly expressed in the org's priorities. But if you see a pattern where a lot of your work doesn't line up with the organization's priorities, this is a good thing for you to talk to your manager about. And then the last tip is just be patient. So at most organizations, particularly for the higher levels, it can take multiple review cycles to get promoted. So this happened very notably to me one time. I was really excited to be put up for promotion. Some people said really wonderful, awesome things about me that made me feel great. And I didn't get it. We didn't ring the bell. And there was an ego hit there. I did not feel good for several weeks, but the important thing to do is just get back to work, keep demonstrating your value, and address any feedback that comes up. And that's it for the tips. Anybody have any Q&A?
Sure. Hello, it was a really nice presentation. I really enjoyed it. It was focused on the career progression in the Foursquare, but what I wanted to ask you, because you changed a few companies, or a lot of companies as I understood, what are the deal breakers? What were the deal breakers for you, and what to seek for in the companies that, in the future companies that people are applying for? Because I ask this because I experienced already some totally non-organized companies which don't have OKRs, and also I experienced also a company which had OKRs, but they didn't. For 1 year, they decided not to do the review at all. So it's quite messy. I guess here in Serbia there is a lot of outsourcing companies that are probably not caring too much about these stuff. So yeah, what were deal breakers for you, and what to seek for when searching for for a long career path?
Right, that's a great question. Thanks. So, the way that I'm going to interpret your question is during an interview cycle, what are some good ways to kind of sniff out whether or not this is a good place for your career, right? And so the first thing that I would say is I have a really strong no assholes rule. So I've worked for some awesome people, and I've worked for some people that were really difficult all the time. And I have left jobs because because the company dynamic was not good and was not good for my growth. It can be difficult to sniff that out during an interview, but I think it's a really good screening criteria. And you want to work with people and for people that want you to be better and encourage you to be better and encourage that growth. Some other good questions that you can ask are just kind of like talking points from this from this slide deck. So ask them about what their review process, their annual review process is like and how it works. If you get the impression that it's a little chaotic or a little bit unstructured, I guess I would say that's not a good fit for me. You'd have to decide whether that's not a good fit for you. But the more chaotic it is, the harder it is to grow. And then, I think you already spoke about the fact that you've been in some companies that don't have any annual goals at all, or some companies that don't. They have annual goals, but they don't really follow them well. You can sniff out the first part in an interview. The second part, you might ask. They might say that they have annual goals, and you might find out later that structure doesn't really work. So a way that I might ask about that during an interview process is to ask, what were last year's goals and how did you do on them, right? And so then you get both the do you have goals at all question answered, and then you have a little bit of a check. So, and I think the correct answer is not we checked off all of our goals. I think the correct answer is probably we got some really important goals done, and we didn't get a few done, because you always want big, audacious goals. You want to, audacious is a tough word. You want very, very aggressive goals that are hard to reach, and so I think a healthy company sets goals where some of them don't get hit, but has a good reason for why. Yeah, that's all I can think of right now. This is a great question, thanks.
One question about your suggestion of keeping a daily journal of your activity and increasing your awareness of where you stand with your managers. Mm-hmm. Could you expand on that point with an example of how would one do this? For example, let's say he's a senior engineer and he is responsible for knowing about the service mm-hmm. and its bugs and how it fits in the whole picture. How would that look like?
Yeah, so the journal to me is really about writing down times that I've made an impact, right? And so, a lot of the work that I do is useful, but it's not really impactful. So those impactful things will only come up, once every couple of weeks, couple times a month, something like that. And so if you've shipped a really notable feature, or if you, if there's been a drop in the number of incidents, the bad incidents that have been happening to your service, that you feel like you've done something to contribute to that, those are good things to write down. The other part of your question, I think, was how do you talk about this thing with your manager?
It's more about so an example is you make a log of the impacts, not if mm-hmm. it's some nice to have feature is counted less than some critical to have or critical bug that needs to be resolved.
Right.
So I'm guessing you answered my question actually about what would be more impactful and what is important to be kept as a log, because you can later show that you had an impact.
Yes.
And you realize also some awareness of where are you impactful, and that is what it really counts. So I'm guessing you answered it. Thanks.
Yeah, that's it. And also, if most of what you do is write code, then at the end of the year, you can go through the list of pull requests that you closed. That's a pretty, that takes a lot of time. my work has kind of drifted away from the code and towards documents or participating in impactful decisions. Those can be a little bit more difficult to trace out the history. So maybe that's another reason why I lean towards keeping a little bit of a journal for myself.
Any other questions? There is one in the back.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. And one question about, you mentioned then when you're progressing from senior roles to like more impactful, like staff or senior staff, you need to like make an impact like a senior director or something like that. But how do you know what to do actually? Because if you're like covered in a lot of like day-to-day jobs and tasks, how do you know what's like more impactful?
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is another area where there's a bit of a progression to it. So at the staff or senior staff level, I would expect most of those people to be getting a lot of guidance from the people that they report to. At the distinguished engineer level, it's kind of wide open. So like Jason in the back, he's my boss. And I talk to him about once a quarter about what I'm working on and whether or not that's the right thing to do. And at this level, he's paying me for my judgment, right? And so I get invited. The people at Foursquare, a lot of them really want to work with me on a lot of different things. And so it's not so much about picking what I am going to do as it is about filtering and picking what I'm not going to do. And really focusing on the things that I think will have the biggest impact for Foursquare, validating them with my boss, and then the people that I have to say no to, doing that in a way that everybody feels good about it in the end, which like that's another skill all in itself. Did I answer the question okay, or do you want to ask a follow-up?
Okay, so that's like in the highest level, but if you don't know like what to do, like do you ask like your manager, can he like direct you somewhere to like do something that's going to like impact more teams or more companies? So that was like the question. If you don't know and you can't figure out, is that what your manager can help you or something?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way that I usually start when I talk to Jason is I say, what is your biggest problem? What is bothering you the most? And if it's something that I can go fix, I go fix it. And so it's a mixture of self-directed, asking the right questions, and getting the feedback that what I'm doing is the right stuff. But you definitely need a lot of input from your manager, and also that needs to. What you bring to that conversation is your own unique perspective of the things that you see that need to be addressed, and so there's like a good dialogue there. And because you'll be operating at a different level of detail than your manager will be, you'll see things that they won't see, and that's one of the really valuable parts of the relationship. And over time, you just get better at recognizing patterns and recognizing problems when they're small instead of when they're big, and that's another way that you can deliver that value. Cool.
Any other questions? There is one here.
Hi, I have a question about the game metaphor for career progression. So I like the comparison, but I'm not sure if chess and Go are the right games to kind of use as a reference because they're finite zero-sum games.
Yeah.
Meaning that they have an end condition, whether you win or lose, and when you're losing, somebody else is winning, and when you're winning, somebody else is losing. So if you think that's a correct way to interpret the progression of your career, like, what do you think that what's the end condition of playing the game? Or how can we determine what's the like state where we win or lose? Or if you don't think it's a good example, what other games could actually be a good example?
Well, that is a tough question. So, so one, yes, it is a weak metaphor. I brought it up to sort of like encourage a mindset. I think you're right that there is no like explicit winning or losing. I feel like I'm winning in my career if I'm working with awesome people and I'm working on cool projects and people think that the work that I'm doing is great. That's definitely not zero sum. So I don't know, like maybe something more open-ended like D&D might be better. Honestly, I wasn't sure if D&D was cool in Europe. But I would consider something like that. Do you have any suggestions?
I do. Maybe Candy Crush. I mean,
yeah, Foursquare is hiring.
Thank you for the presentation. I wanted to ask if we can see the career ladder slide again and maybe read it later.
I have actually a better document. Jason, thumbs up? Okay. I'll just show, so give me a second, because that slide is like a zoomed out view of the company-wide career ladder. And we have a more focused one for engineering, which is better. Right. It just didn't look good on the slide. So let me find that doc.
I mean, we can read it, right?
There's no secret sauce.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so I need, so probably first stop sharing the presentation and then move this over to the, oh, no, I need to go back to Google Meet, then share this. So this doc is not going to go great on the screen either because it's quite long. You can see here going down the side, it goes from engineer 1, engineer 2, senior staff, and like I can't even get all of the criteria for engineer 1 on the screen. So if anybody wants to dig into this in detail and really wants to like see how the sausage is made, come up here after the Q&A, and I'd be happy to show you anything. But let me zoom this in a little bit more, because I do think the technical skill section is maybe we could look at. I think this is engineer 1. So this says like you're self-sufficient in at least one area of the system with a high-level understanding of other components. Produces correct and consumable output with guidance, and then participates in design with guidance. And then as we move up to engineer 2, it's got a lot of the same kind of criteria, but it pulls off the with guidance part because you're expected to be more independent. Up here at the senior engineer level, there's now an expectation that you partner with product managers to turn those requirements into technical specs for individual features. Contribute to new areas independently, both in terms of learning new systems, oops, I can't see, and introducing new tools and techniques to the team. Understands the broad architecture of the domain. I'm kind of skipping around a little bit, and I'm also going to skip a couple levels so you see like a bigger jump. If we get down to like, let's go all the way to staff plus, or senior staff, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. This gets a little bit more vague, as we talked about during that question. So now it's like, hey, we need to produce architectural guidance to meet strategic organizational goals.
What does that mean?
Did you say, what does that mean?
Yes.
So remember when we were talking about reviewing your company's annual goals and making sure that your work lines up to that? That means that when we're designing a new system and we're building out a system architecture, it also needs to match to those business goals. Because ideally, they're kind of inspired by each other, right? Because the business goals are going to depend on the technology, and so you want to make business goals that your technology organization can deliver, but also the technology's architecture needs to really keep those goals in mind so that it delivers the right amount. Because if you deliver too much, you have a lower return on investment because there's too much investment. Or if you miss the goals, you're not getting enough return in your return on investment. Is that a good answer? Or,
Yes.
Yeah. And then, raise the bar on product health expectations and engineer efficiency generally. So this is like raising the bar outside of your team and really helping the whole organization get better. And then drive technical reviews to make sure, again, that those designs that other people are producing are also fulfilling the long-term goals of the company. So this is like a big jump here from like, I'm writing code to I'm helping other engineers be more awesome.
Right.
And if you want to come and look in more detail at this doc after a Q&A, we can go through some more stuff. And that invitation is for anyone.
Thanks.
Any more? Let's see. Yes.
Have you come across any review processes that are like throughout the year where people get like points from their managers when they do a good job, like on a maybe weekly basis or daily basis, or lose points if they do something bad, and at the end of the year there is like a summary of the additional review or.
So here at Foursquare we have a system where everyone in the company gets like a budget of what do we call them, forward points, and we every month have some to give out to other people, and then like managers and directors and VPs have larger point budgets to give out. I don't think we don't deduct points if somebody makes a mistake, and I don't think that those points like directly feed into the review process. It's more of just like a game to kind of like get people excited about doing stuff and helping their coworkers. I personally haven't worked in a system like that. One of the things that I would worry about there is when you have extremely explicit criteria and an extremely explicit scoring mechanism like that, people will game the fuck out of that system, right? And so this is a very common problem in sales organizations where sometimes companies will design an extremely complicated sales plan, and there actually is, dollars that come out of that, or we have dinars here, yeah. And so you will see that salespeople will do awful, crazy things to make sure that they hit those numbers, and I don't think that I really want that out of my engineering peers. And so, have you seen a system like that? Oh, okay. Yeah. So, so like the positive only giving points for fun is the thing that I've experienced. And that's the thing that I would encourage for other people.
I can add that we have a system called Anytime Feedback that's where your manager is talking to you each month, like not just like about your daily task, but like how are things going? Do you have any problems? Anything that blocks you? Communication, technical stuff. And every 3 months, there is like a conversation about your career progression, like how you can move forward, where you can grow. And this is really like meant to be like not just wait for the review process and then we still what we did for the last year, or just go through the log, which are really helpful, but have it like constantly given feedback to you, you give feedback to your manager, you give feedback to your peers. It sounds like it's time consuming, but it's really valuable for the healthy relationship in the organization. Just like addition to those.
Yeah. That's a great point, Ilya. Thanks for making that. The reason that I like the anytime feedback system is because if I fuck up in April, I don't want to find out about it next January, right? Okay. Can I just go on vacation for all of April? No, we have that offsite in New York in April. I can't go on vacation in April.
Actually, I have one question. You mentioned that you worked for several startups. How well organized they were in the sense of like, did they have performance review, or it was like, let's ship it and think about performance if you survive?
So there's been a wide variety. I would say like the companies that are 10 or less often have either no review process or a very minimal review process. Let me think about some more patterns. Once you get past 15 or 20 people, the company also has more years under its belt, maybe, and I do see a little bit more structure there. And then, but at the small, medium-sized company level, I don't see a career ladder like this. Like, this is very explicit and very well thought out, and a lot of it comes from leaders that have been. They're very experienced, shall we say. They've been around the block a few times. And so, like, I helped edit this document, and we had, six or 10 people who were all experienced leaders with, 10 plus years of management or architect type experience contributing to this document. And, putting those learnings in there, and also making sure that we didn't make some of the old mistakes that we've all made before.
Okay, if there are no other questions, big round of applause, please, for Marshall. Thank you.